Nobody's in favor of corruption, except maybe the corrupt. When corruption does come to light, it's often the Justice Department that takes the lead. My next guest leads a nonprofit that works anti-fraud at the front end by supporting whistleblowers. She's the president and CEO of the Anti-Fraud Coalition, Jacklyn DeMar. Ms. DeMar, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
And we had one of your associate attorneys on recently, and it led me to have interest in this organization. You take a little different approach in almost nurturing the whistleblowing function. Tell us more about TAF, Anti-Fraud Coalition.
So I feel like, whistleblower used to be a little bit more of a bad word, but I think we're coming around in America to realizing that this can be a good thing for everyone. The Anti-Fraud Coalition was really founded after the 1986 amendments to the False Claims Act, which is really the number one tool for the government to recover mistaken or stolen funds from the taxpayer. So what the False Claims Act is really a tool for private citizens to come forward, report fraud to the government, and have the government either investigate and then either take on that case for them, or a whistleblower can go forward on their own and pursue that case on behalf of the government and bring back those taxpayer funds that were stolen to the government and receive a portion of those funds for doing that work. And usually they're insiders. They can be outside competitors or people analyzing data, but usually they're people inside the company that see something going wrong. They report it to the government after usually trying to report it internally and trying to get something stopped internally. Nothing happens, or they get retaliated against, and then they end up reporting to the government. The government can either investigate and take the case on again, or the whistleblower can go forward. And so what TAF does is really both support the whistleblowers and also and try to educate them and have them understand what these programs are, because there's the False Claims Act. There's also an SEC and CFTC, AML. So there's financial frauds, whistleblower programs as well that really protect the financial markets. So we try to support whistleblowers, make sure they understand these programs, and then also support the attorneys that are bringing cases on behalf of the whistleblowers, so making sure they have resources, the access to those kinds of things.
And you deal primarily with federal contracting companies, contractors, and people inside those companies that you feel have access to information that could be fraud.
Right. So it's a lot of procurement fraud in, let's say, the defense industry, and then the bulk of it is, I would say, Department of Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare fraud. There's a lot of that kind of fraud. But then it expands into you can have, customs fraud and environmental kinds of fraud. So it's all government procurement fraud.
And then I guess the other interesting aspect you can tell us about is that, yes, people inside, maybe accountants, maybe program managers, have access to information about what's going on. That's the traditional whistleblower, you might say. But then you're developing tools and helping people look that might be external to the whole thing. But because of the availability of procurement data and maybe grant data and other forms of data, Medicare data, people can detect fraud totally externally.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that you can look at trends in data. And for instance, if you're looking at a healthcare fraud case, you can look at one doctor in a community that is billing for, let's say, an opioid that's way, way high, way more than anyone else in that community. And you can kind of look at that from an outsider and say, okay, there has to be something going on here. You can get some more evidence. You can report that to the government. The government then has tools to go in and get into that data some more, get more information, and really develop the case from there. But you can kind of spot trends in the data that can put you on the case that way.
But the data itself doesn't necessarily indicate fraud. Maybe that doctor, everybody's referring pain patients or something to that particular practice. And so I guess the question is, how do you know that what you're doing is not just annoying or harassing an innocent organization or person, but that there really could be something nefarious going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think usually these whistleblowers have an expertise in this area. So they would know that there was there's no reason for this particular doctor to be billing this amount for this particular drug because of their expertise. Either they're also in the industry or something like that, so they would understand this a little bit more. They have some sort of expertise that would lead them to understand and be able to develop the case a little bit better. And once you have allegations in the case, there has to be, this isn't a mistake statute, right? Like, there has to be intent. You have to prove all of that. So this is not a statute that's going to be prosecuting anyone for making a mistake, or for, like you just said, maybe there's a legitimate reason that this person is billing this way. That's not going to get anyone in trouble.
Sure.
There's something that has to be intentional here.
We're speaking with Jacklyn DeMar. She's president and CEO of the Anti-Fraud Coalition. And I guess in some ways, too, this is the original intent of the old medieval qui tam idea, because people are suing on behalf of the royalty, in this case the federal government, not quite royalty, but that notion applies here.
Yeah, I mean, and that the idea is that, the government is only so big, and some people want it bigger and some people want it smaller. But the fact is they just don't have the resources to identify all of the fraud that is out there. Not only do they not have the resources, but, it really does. We just talked about the external whistleblowers, but as far as most of the whistleblowers are internal, and there is just no way that the government could know of a fraud scheme that's internal to a company unless there is a whistleblower that comes forward with that information. And, to the extent that whistleblowers are going forward on behalf of the government, they're really putting their private resources in to supplement all of the resources of the government, which is always a good thing because there's never enough resources for the government to prosecute all the fraud. Any
good recent cases you can point us to that the organization was involved with?
There's been a couple of very good settlements recently. I actually just was speaking the other day with a case against Acadia Behavioral Health Center, and you might have seen there's a recent New York Times kind of expose on this. There's a series of articles about this behavioral health center that was actually admitting patients that didn't need to be admitted. And that this is a across the country scheme. They have they have something like 56 facilities across the country admitting patients that didn't need to be admitted. Once they were admitted, the patients weren't receiving proper treatment. And there was just a whole host of issues going on there. And that whistleblower was the director of nursing there, blew the whistle, and they recovered about $20 million for the government. But on top of that,
this is Medicare?
Also now, yes, this is Medicare. But there's also a Senate investigation, there are criminal investigations, and I think that's one of the good things about this law as well, is that you flag something for the government that can lead to other investigations and a bigger picture enforcement action against some really bad actors that are really committing patient harm.
And personally, what draws you to this particular endeavor in life?
Well, I've always kind of felt that I wanted to do something in this public sector that was really, doing good work. And so I went to law school wanting to do that. And I found this. I didn't know anything about whistleblower law or the False Claims Act or anything like that. But once I kind of found this, I realized that it was, one, really interesting, and two, it was a good way that I could, use the knowledge that I had to really do good work. I find the people that we work with, the whistleblowers, are really coming from a place where they have tried to do the right thing, and they've been either retaliated against or just ignored at every turn. And so they are kind of giving up basically everything to do the right thing here and blow the whistle. And yes, there's a potential that they're going to get a recovery, but so often they don't, or it's not enough to offset what they've really given up, because they give up their livelihoods. They give up, there's all kinds of things that go on when you're a whistleblower. So I just feel like the people we work with are really why I do it.
And do external whistleblowers, say someone who is like you, passionate about this, and I'm looking at Medicare data, and I see that, Dr. Demento in a certain area has this outsized billing for something, and there might be really fraud going on there. He can't retaliate against me because I don't work there, versus the nurse that's inside that says we shouldn't be doing this.
Right. I mean, so those whistleblowers are maybe motivated by something different, but often those whistleblowers are maybe competitors, and so if they're looking to level the playing field for the whole community, right? So if let's say they're a competitor doctor, it's not fair that there's the one doctor in the community is committing fraud in order to bill for all of these things when everyone else is trying to play by the rules. And so I think that's really, I find that is a respectable motivation as well as trying to just level that playing field for the whole community.
And finally, what do you estimate are the key TAM recoveries that your members have gotten since